Hello, I'm Walter Fouts. I have a landscape company for the last 35 years. I like to do the perennial beds, and I like to show you how I do it and why I do it the way I do it. I don't do it the way other landscapers do it. There's an old saying that says the majority is always wrong, and I believe that's true a lot of the time. So let me show you this perennial bed and tell you why I do what I do, so you know the thinking behind it. So it's just not a video of just pretty flowers. Okay, let me show you. Okay. Now this is our garden back here. I have a very narrow entrance, so it's not going to be too exciting. But as we come around the corner, I wanted all of a sudden to kind of see everything. Okay. The camera can't see it all at one shot. Okay. What we have here is a patio because people have to be in the shade and the plants are better off in the sun. You'd never want to reverse that, have the people in the sun, especially here. Okay. One of the things that works really well is to have a lot of different color foliage because when the flowers go away, you'll always have some foliage and some interesting foliage to look at. Now, coming out here, I have a path here that's primarily a shade garden. I've done a collection of Japanese maples. I have 5 different ones. I like the Japanese maples a lot, and pretty much everybody else does. This particular one right here is called Shingu Kaku, and I use that in the sun because that takes the sun really well. There's another one back here that's red. It's called the Bloodgood, and a lot of the Japanese maples be red in the spring, but they won't be red all year round. And the Bloodgood tends to stay pretty red, and it takes the sun pretty well, better than a lot of the Japanese maples really aren't made for this area. Okay, now the path here will come down here. Here's another different little maple. I try to pick the ones that have the most color in the foliage. Okay, now there's a plant here. It's called the Japanese anemones, and this will bloom in the sun or the shade, and it will spread on its own quite well. It can bloom about 4 and sometimes 5 feet tall. What's really nice about it is it can bloom in Halloween time, so a lot of things don't really come into bloom at that time. And this one is just blooming in the spring, so that's kind of nice. Here's what they call a half moon Japanese maple, and look at all the colors. Really nice. It gets to be a fairly big tree. I actually found a fern that has a lot of colors in it. So you can actually find ferns that have reds and oranges in them, and that's very nice. Now, the ground cover here, you see how the gold really pops against the red? That's a Vinca minor, and that's the variegated. This is hard to find. You probably won't find it in most nurseries all the time. I just found a couple of flats, and so I just grabbed them because they were available. Over here, these are called coral bells or heuchera. This particular variety is actually the native species called Maxima, and they get the tallest. Now, the nice thing about the coral bells is they can bloom like 5 months long, so you get a really nice long, and they do take the sun or the shade because we have a little mix over here. Okay, now coming down the walkway. Okay, as you see this walkway here, let me show you. The stone is real stone, and rather than use cement is kind of my enemy. I like to get rid of as much cement as possible. So the stone is not cheap. I think I got like 36 of them for $1,000, and I asked the clients if this is something they'd want to spend on. I would have saved a lot of money if I just put in cement squares. These are actually caps to walls for stone walls. This leads you on to the patio. What I wanted was a lot of different entrances and exit to the patio, so you can get up and take a look and not have to worry about other people in your way as much as possible. Okay, probably one of my favorite things are these climbing Eden roses. And Eden is a David Austin rose. It's not a rebloomer, but I like the climbers because you can get 200 flowers on one bush. And what I've done is I put another Eden that's a white Eden, and then I have another one that's kind of pretty much in bloom here, and this is a red Eden, so they're all Edens. Now, I did not put a climber on the back one because I need to get up there to trim them, and I don't want to have to walk over thorns. So that one has no plants. You could actually do this with just one rose and it would cover pretty well, but it's a long term. It takes like 7 years to really get a full bloom on the thing. Now let me take you out into the sun garden here. Okay. Now, if you look around, I have roses, and quite a few of them, but they're generally not together. They're kind of spread out everywhere, okay? I do that on purpose. I don't want all the roses together for a couple of reasons. Number one, if they're all together, the aphids just hop from one to the other, and then you got a bug infection. Aphids don't get their wings for about 3 weeks, and they can't get to the one that's 5 feet away. So I like to spread them out. The other thing is the roses are deciduous in the winter, and I can hide them better when they just sticks behind some other plants. And since they do get 4 feet tall, I never really want to put them right next to the walkway. I always want to stair step up the plants from the walkway or from this grass. Basically, you can see the low stuff by the walkway, and then it gradually usually gets bigger, and then you go to another walkway, and I try to get it a little smaller, okay? Now, what you really have to do is get a discipline to only get the plants that only grow the size that you want them to be. And that's hard because you can't just pick any pretty flower when you go in the nursery. You have to find out how big it gets, okay? Basically, you don't want to fight nature because nature always wins in the end. So if a plant wants to be in the sun and it wants to be 4 feet tall, find a place where it can be in the sun and be 4 feet tall, okay? Instead of trying to trim it and hedge it all the time. And once you start that, you can't stop. You have to do that for years. And why do all that extra maintenance? Okay, right in front of me here is a Peruvian lily, or it's called Alstroemeria in the Latin. This particular one, and the white I like because it has a very stiff stem and it will last 10 days cut. But what I really like about it is when it's done blooming and you just have a stalk, if you just grab the thing in the center, you can just pop them off, and it always pops off at the very bottom, and you don't need any tools, which I think is really nice to do. They do go down deciduous and then they come back again, kind of thing. They can get a little rust on them, but it does grow right through it. It doesn't seem to bother them too much. Okay, now going over here, these are geraniums, but I didn't just pick any geraniums. These are particular geraniums that can take our heat. Okay, and you can see how many blooms these things are really tight, and they also have some interesting leaves to them, which is really nice. And here is a little purple rose. I like to have a little purple rose just because it's a little interesting. And then over here, this is called Brandy, and Brandy is an old rose and very hardy. It kind of sticks out in the roses because it tends to have a lot of red new growth and red stems, and it gets to be a big flower. But I mostly wanted one that was guaranteed gonna grow, and Brandy's been around since the 60s, and it does very hardy, and that's what we want, is to build it on hardy plants. Okay, basically what I start with is daylilies and German irises, because you can walk all over those things. They take sun and they'll take part shade, and they're gonna last. So what I do is I figure out which ones I want to use, Now they come in all different sizes and colors. Here's one called raspberry, and it only gets a foot high, and you can see how many buds there are. They'll have a lot of flowers on the thing. Okay, then let me find some other ones for you. Here's some other ones. Here's a nice pink one, kind of thing with a yellow throat. And here is another kind of salmon one I think is very nice. And back here are yellow ones. Now what I like to do, I don't buy 5 gallons because they're kind of expensive when you're doing this many plants. And so what I do is I buy 3 1-gallons and I plant them in a triangle, and I plant them about 1.5 feet apart. Okay, and then when they all go together, they mass bloom, and it's all about mass bloom with daylilies and irises. You want big flowers, and you want things that will just look like all yellow, just the whole thing. And you can see how many buds this thing's got. It's going to do that, but this is only the first year. It really won't get its best for about 3 years. Okay, now the thing you have to know about daylilies is they have ones that are bloom in the spring, and they also have ones called rebloomers, and these are all rebloomers. I only put in rebloomers, and they bloom spring, summer, and fall. And I do the same thing with the German irises, which, okay, I think everybody's favorite is the blue when they start off, and I like them when they're much taller than the leaves, and they show up a lot more. And you can see can get a lot of blooms on 1 or 2 stems, and they're very big. You can see it from far away. Okay, now down here are some more geraniums, and these geraniums I really like because they have the little white edge, and it looks really nice with the pink flowers. And you can see how hardy they are, and they're not just any geraniums, they're a geranium that will take the sun. Okay, so that's what you want to do. Now if you have a daylily that's short, you want to put it by the walkway, and one that's really tall, like in the very background, I have some back there is the yellow ones, and since they're tall, you can see them from far away, and I think that's the best way to put the taller ones in the background and the shorter ones in the foreground. Okay, then you might be familiar with this little agapanthus here, and you probably know it just kind of a one-time bloomer in the spring. Okay, but I get these from Greenwood Nurseries, and believe it or not, they are repeat bloomers of the agapanthus. And so I said I like the rebloomers instead of just blooming once and then waiting a whole nother year to have them bloom again. Okay, now back here, in back of those, I have these brand new geraniums. And what these do is they're dwarfs. They only get 3 feet high. And remember, I said you just want them to grow a certain size, and these are fairly new, so I'm just trying them out. They come in pink and blue when you first buy them. And this one's called Let's Dance. And I bought 6 of them, 3 of each color, and I'm just trying to see how they do. And they seem to be doing pretty well. And I have 3 more over here. You can see these are in buds pretty much, and we'll see how well they rebloom for you. Okay, then over here, this is called Cinco de Mayo rose, and you can see how many flowers are on one branch, and they're all like a mass. And I like the color because I thought it was a very unusual red, and so I got those. I couldn't pass that up one, so that was very nice. Okay, I'll give you a little pan of the garden. Now, I'll do a little time on the overhang I built. I build these overhangs because people have to be in the shade, first thing. And what I like to do, which is kind of different than the other people, is I like to put an arch on the bottom of the beams because I don't want to feel like there's a big heavy beam on top of my head. And so I just put a nice arch in the thing, and on the top of those, most people put the 2x2s, but if you're going to get up there to trim the roses, you don't want to be standing on 2x2s because you'll fall right through them. So I use the 4x4s, and what I do is I notch them all in. they're not really sitting on top. They're all sitting on in notches all the way through the thing. And the reason why I do that is because the boards are not straight. They tend to curve a little bit, and it's really hard to straighten them when you're 8 feet in the air. So I use those notches just to put them in there. That'll straighten out each board, and so you get a perfectly good spacing. The ends of them, I cut them so they just narrow at the top. I wanted to kind of have it like a bird's wing going up, so I'm always cutting them so it looks like they're getting thinner as you go up, kind of thing. The lighting, I want really nice lighting that's very even, that's very soft, like a 40-watt light bulb. Of course, we all do the LEDs now, kind of thing. You basically want to have these every 4 feet apart. Then I have them on a, let me show you, a little switch right here. Let's see if I get this. Oh yeah, here you are. Okay, and you can adjust it to how much light you like. Now, one thing I did, if you look up here, there's a little brown box with a little outlet, and that's got 2 plugs in it. And if you're having a party and you want to make it a little brighter, you can buy these little white lights about a foot apart, and each one will go around halfway, and then the other one will go around the other way, and it just makes the whole thing a little brighter, and I like that a lot. And for, you know, if you want to just put a little more excitement in the thing. Okay, now they're lucky here because we have a nice view. There's not another house in back of us, so that works out really well. We had the fence painted instead of white. We softened it up with a little kind of a beigey color, and to make it blend in a little bit more. And the HMO was okay with this. You know, you can't just pick any color you want here. Okay, now over here I have some tree roses back in the back here, and they're red ones called troubadours, and these will bloom all spring and all summer into the fall, and they can just mass bloom really easy. These are really young yet, but when they get going, the head will be twice as big as that and have 3 times as many flowers. It'll be very nice. Right next to it on the ground there, hasn't got going yet. This is Golden Celebration, and that's a David Austin rose, and that will be a climber that you can put on the fence and kind of hide the fence a little bit, and that gets a much bigger flower than you see now. It has a lot of the petals on it. And here's some of the hybrid teas. I don't put in all David Austins are all hybrid teas because they bloom at different times. Okay, most of your multifloras, the smaller flowers that have big bunches, will bloom sooner, and then you'll get the hybrid teas will bloom next, and then after that you'll get the David Austins, and when the David Austins go down, then the hybrid teas come back for another bloom. So you just always have something to bloom as much as possible. And here's some little dwarf ones, kind of pretty, and you can see it's very close to the walkway there, and that's how it will work best. Also, they have little ground cover roses right here, and that will spread quite far, like 6 feet or so, and still stay under a foot easily. And they just mass bloom when they get going. These are just getting started, really, kind of thing. Now here is the gladiolus, and that's a bulb, of course. And the nice thing about these is they don't take up a lot of room, and they're pretty tall, and they're really nice for a background, and they're summer bloomers. Okay, if you want to use bulbs in the very back that are 4 feet high, I would recommend you get Watsonias for the spring, because they'll be up in the spring, and then I would use gladiolus for the summer. And then they also have a fall one, I can't think of it right now, and Cucosmia, and that will bloom in the fall, so you can have them bloom at all different times. Okay, here's another one that's more of a dwarf. I like the talls kind of thing, but this is very pretty. Okay, and what I did as far as the overhang, if you notice, it's painted, but it's not really painted. It's what it is. It's a solid stain. And you don't want to stain the wood until it dries out. All the wood you buy is all wet. Moisture meter is very cheap. I just stick a few pins in there and I find out how much water is in the wood, and when it gets down to like 10%, then I'll stain it, and the stain will go in deeper if it's dry, of course. I've done a lot of different studies on it, and it really wasn't a matter of which brand I used. It really was a matter of the more I put on it, the longer it would last. And so instead of putting it on with a spray gun, which would go very fast, I do it with rollers and a paintbrush, which gets twice as much on there. And so I get about 8-10 years out of this solid color. Now, if you want to do a clear color, most of the ones last maybe 2 years, and nobody's going to keep redoing them every 2 years. So I really like to go with the solid stain, although a lot of people really want to see the wood and the wood grain. There is a new product out that has some plastic in it that they'll claim it will go 4 years kind of thing. It's not quite as nice to work with as this. This lays down a little nicer kind of thing. And what I wanted to do is make this kind of disappear. This is a camouflage color. It's basically a sage green, and the sage green, what I like about it is it blends with every other color on the flowers, and it makes the flowers pop out more because it's very much a background color, and then you can mix all the different colors with it. I've done the same thing. We put in a little garden shed here. It has lots of windows, and to keep it really bright, and you can grow little plants. It has a little sunroof on half of it. We don't want a whole one here because it just could get too hot kind of thing. We bought this from Canada in the fall because they put them on sale because they can't sell them in the wintertime. They just want to get rid of them. So we got this, I think it was like 4,000. It's normally like 2,000. Okay. Now, this walkway here, okay, what we did is we just used the cheapest thing we could do, because the hardscape, if you need to save thousands, and nobody wants to cut hundreds, they all want to cut thousands to do it, okay, this is the cheapest one you can do. All these Pennsylvania bluestones here were just left over from doing the patio, and so I just used what I had, all these going through here, see, and I put most of them where you're going to walk most of the time. Now, going back here, these pink flowers, they're called Biancas. And Biancas are a good mass bloomer. There's a little breakfast nook here, and I wanted her to look out. And these will cover the wall. Trellises get to be expensive if you got a lot of walls. So what I did is I just got some nice stainless steel wire, and I just screw that in, and I just run it the whole length of it, and we grow some wisterias on it, and we'll help use that for also growing these Bianca roses.